Well, we're waiting.
Well, this one's been a long time coming. Several days longer than I expected, if I'm honest. Mostly because of the fine people at American Airlines, who managed to cancel my flights not once but 2 days in a row, forcing me to embark on my own personal odyssey just to get home. It wasn't all bad though. All that enforced leisure time did at least give me a chance to catch up on the movie itself, and so here we find ourselves. If there's one thing I never had on my bingo card for this year, it's that the most contentious, bitterly controversial and divisive movie of 2026 would be made by Christopher Nolan of all people. Depending on who you talk to, the Odyssey is either a disgusting cinematic abomination that completely subverts and disrespects Homer's original work while shamelessly pandering to the mythical modern audience, or an undisputed masterpiece of film, the crowning achievement of Nolan's career and a strong candidate for the greatest thing the human race has ever achieved. Fucking calm down, love. But no matter which side of the divide you come down on, half the movie-going world is gonna despise you until the end of time itself.
Welcome to America!
Here's the thing though, dear viewer, real life is a bit more complicated and nuanced than that, and as it turns out, so is the Odyssey. And now that I've had a chance to experience Christopher Nolan's wannabe magnum opus for myself, what is my verdict? Meh. I know that sounds like a bit of a weird reaction considering all the hype around this film, but it's the word that best sums up my feelings by the time the credits rolled. I just didn't feel much of anything. For all the controversies and culture warfare swirling around it, the Odyssey was pretty much exactly what I expected from a late-stage Christopher Nolan film. Technically impressive and commendably ambitious, visually dour and bleak, emotionally sterile and weirdly lacking in pace, urgency or satisfying payoffs, populated by cold, distant characters that give nothing away and invite no empathy from the audience, dialogue that's jarringly clunky and on the nose, often delivered by talented but miscast actors, and ultimately, an ending that fails to capitalise on its incredible build-up. It's a movie about love, yearning, adventure, wonder, mysticism, and epic mythology woven together by a man who either can't or won't understand any of those things. The Odyssey picks up about 20 years after the fall of Troy and the end of the Trojan Wars. Matt Damon's living on a beach with Charlize Theron with no memory of how he got there, while Zendaya stares at him every once in a while to display her incredible acting range. Ha! Go on, love, show us what you can do. Anyway, this setup acts as a framing device for the rest of the narrative that gradually gets filled in the form of flashbacks. The first of which is the Siege of Troy, where Matt Damon uses the Trojan horse to get him and his men inside so they can open the gates and end the 10-year-long siege. Yep, it took him 10 years to come up with that fucking idea. Anyway, with the war successfully over, everyone's like, guess we'll go home then. His second in command is like, shall we take the quickest, easiest, and most logical route, sir? But Matt Damon's like, nah, it'll be fine. So instead they head south and end up trapped in a cave with a giant cyclops that eats a few of them. Then they escape, but Matt Damon just can't resist shooting it with his bow, which incurs the wrath of Poseidon, who blows them to another island altogether, where they run into a bunch of medieval space marines who promptly kill the shit out of them. It's at this point that the survivors decide they've had pretty much enough of Matt Damon's shit, and they head off to find a lovely woman named Cersei who turns them into pigs because she hates men or something. But then Matt Damon shows up and persuades her to turn them back into humans, and decides he should probably get some advice on how to get home quickly because, you know, this whole journey is starting to drag on a bit now. So him and his bros literally go to hell itself and get berated by the spirit of Elliot Page for a while, then land on another island where they're told not to eat any of the cattle there or they'll all be cursed to death. So they eat the cattle, and wouldn't you know it, their ship gets destroyed in a storm and Matt Damon washes up on a beach with Charlize Theron, who keeps him drugged and ignorant for the next 7 years. But eventually he decides he ought to get back to his wife Anne Hathaway because it's been like 20 years now, and she's probably wondering where he got to. I mean, like, no offense to Anne Hathaway or anything, but if I had a choice between her and an immortal Charlize Theron, well, I know which one I'd be choosing. Anyway, so he makes a raft out of bits of leftover ship that washed up with him and just kinda says, fuck it, let's see where I end up. And wouldn't you know it, he ends up right back at Ithaca, the very place he's been trying to get to this whole time. That was lucky. Now, while all this has been going on, Anne Hathaway's been fending off potential suitors who all want to marry her so they can become the next king of Ithaca, and as you can imagine, they're getting a bit impatient after 2 decades of being dicked around. Anyway, can Anne Hathaway hold out until Matt Damon rescues himself for the first time in cinema history, or will Ithaca fall to chaos and bloodsheds? You know, when I see the frankly ludicrous amount of praise that's been heaped on this movie over the past week, it kinda reminds me of the borderline hysteria around Black Panther a few years ago, except with pretentious wannabe intellectuals terrified of getting lumped in with the unwashed plebs if they dare to criticize Nolan's masterpiece, or just partisan culture warriors willing to say and do basically anything to own the chuds. The movie's been dogged by controversy ever since the initial casting was announced, so I guess we might as well start by addressing the 3 elephants in the room. Yes, Elliot Page, Lupita Nyong'o, and Zendaya are all in this movie. Yes, Elliot Page looks just as ridiculous as you might imagine trying to run in a heavy suit of armor. No, they don't have more than a couple of minutes of screen time each, and they're largely irrelevant to the story, and Zendaya doesn't even act so much as exists on screen. And yeah, I know it's the principle of the thing for a lot of people, and if you're really bothered by stuff like that, it's kind of like me saying I only spat in your food a little bit, so why aren't you eating it? The point I'm getting at here is that as much as these 3 dominated the headlines around this movie, they really don't have much of an impact on the film itself, and they had no impact on my perception of it. They come and go so quickly you barely even notice them. While we're talking about casting though, probably the funniest bit for me was John Leguizamo as a blind old servant of Odysseus who's been given a shitty white wig to try to make him look older, and basically nothing else. I mean, couldn't you have just hired an actual old man? Are you really telling me that John Leguizamo was so fucking good that nobody else could play this role? Ah, whatever. Ultimately, you'll either accept stuff like this, or you just won't watch the movie in the first place. For me though, the bigger issue with the Odyssey is the creative philosophy behind it, and I might as well just come out and say it here. I was pretty fucking bored with this movie. Not because of the source material, not because of the labyrinthine adventure, and not because of the runtime, but because it just refuses to let me in. Nolan's slavish devotion to rendering everything into a grounded, believable tone robs the Odyssey of the very things that make it so compelling. Its mythology and its sense of wonder. It's like looking at some beautiful sculpture rendered into a mathematical formula. You can sense the work and precision that went into it, but it doesn't really stir anything in you. There wasn't a single character in this movie that I could ever truly empathize with and root for, because none of them talk or act anything like real human beings. Damn man, even the fucking gods are boring. I mean really, Zendaya's the only one who takes physical form, and even then she acts more like Odysseus' conscience than an active part of the narrative. Odysseus himself is written as this weirdly cold, distant, aloof figure who barely reacts to the things he sees and experiences. His decisions imply that he's got a strong sense of adventure, recklessness, and curiosity about the world, but his emotions and dialogue are the exact opposite. He's like an android journeying home with no particular sense of urgency or investment, simply because he's programmed to do it. Where's the loving husband and father desperate to see his family again? Where's the absent king eager to retake the throne and lead his kingdom again? Where's the bold and witty adventurer, the compassionate leader of men? By the time the finale rolled around, I didn't particularly care whether he made it home because he doesn't seem to care much either. The movie seems to be portraying him as a vaguely traumatized war veteran haunted by his actions at Troy and his guilt over the sacking of the city, which I get the impression wasn't really part of Homer's original story, and his various trials and setbacks are framed more as a well-deserved punishment for what he sees as his betrayal of his principles, which is nice and all, but it also robs him of agency because he's no longer striving towards the goal of getting home. home, but instead just kind of waiting for the next horrible thing to happen to him. His reunion with his son, his wife, and his vengeance against the suitors should be this triumphant, cathartic release of emotions that have been building through the whole movie, but it all comes across as flat, procedural, and obligatory. Just a brutal fight in semi-darkness where you can barely even tell what's going on. Shit man, even watching an old dog finally dying after being reunited with his beloved master for the first time in years, which should be an emotional slam dunk, doesn't really hit because the character himself barely even acknowledges it. The only actor who really seems to be going for it is Robert Pattinson, who plays every trick in the book to make his antagonist as much of an obnoxious, cowardly asshole as possible. It works, you really do hate the guy, but if the only character in your movie that inspires any kind of emotion is your antagonist, well, you've got problems. Another problem here is the dialogue, not just the jarring use of American accents and modern slang, swear words and terminology, but how fucking on the nose and clumsy it is.
10 years on this fucking beach. Let's go home.
Come on, Chris, you're fucking better than this, man. On the technical side of things, I'll at least give Nolan props for using practical effects as much as possible and shooting in real locations. That kind of shit really is a vanishing art, and it's nice to see that level of dedication and commitment in modern Hollywood. I mean, I'm not entirely sure where he did his location shooting, but it doesn't look or feel anything like the Eastern Mediterranean, where it's meant to be set. With the washed out colours, overcast grey skies and bleak windswept hillsides, it looks more like Scotland in November. And I guess that really sums up the overall tone of this film. Bleak, dull, muted and relentlessly dour. An adventure without spirit. A hero's journey without a hero. An epic saga without any sense of scale and grandeur. A clinical, precise, finely engineered movie made by a man of great technical skill and intellectual power, who can process and study every line of the source material, but who seems to lack the romantic soul and the wonder and the sheer humanity to bring it all to life. For me, The Odyssey was an impressive, thought-provoking movie with an incredible cast, made by one of the most successful directors of his age, and it'll probably go on to rake in a lot of money and awards just like we all knew it would. But ultimately, it's a movie I'll probably never watch or even think about again. And that really is the most damning indictment of all. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.